Have you ever noticed how silence can be more powerful than words? That text you didn't reply to, that glance you turned away, it seems small, but inside a man's mind it's like setting off an earthquake. What goes on in his head isn't obvious, and almost never what he shows on the outside. Today, I'm going to open that black box for you, speaking as a friend who's been through it and as someone who understands how the male brain reacts in moments like this. By the end of this video, you'll see why ignoring him can spark desire, trigger insecurity, and even decide the future of your relationship. When you decide to ignore a man, even for a short while, it's not just about leaving him on read. To him, it feels like a crack in the ground he thought was solid. The human brain hates broken patterns. If you've always responded quickly and suddenly go quiet, his mind doesn't calmly think, "Oh, she must be busy." No, instead, alarms go off inside his head. It feels like losing control, and that shakes him to the core. Picture this. He sends a "good morning, how'd you sleep?" and sees the little check mark or the read receipt, but no reply. Outwardly, he might scroll through his phone or pretend he's unbothered, but inside there's a storm. Did I do something wrong? Did she lose interest? Is she upset with me? His ego starts to wobble, and the longer the silence lasts, the louder those questions get. Science backs this up. Studies show that social rejection activates the same regions of the brain as physical pain. In other words, being ignored doesn't just sting emotionally, it actually hurts neurologically. That explains why he can't stay neutral. Even if he plays it cool, his nervous system is already on edge, flooded with stress hormones. That's the first punch of silence. It shatters his sense of security. And that crack in the armor is exactly what sets the stage for what comes next: curiosity. The male brain can't stand unfinished stories. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect. Our minds obsess over things that feel incomplete. And when you go quiet, you instantly become that unfinished task looping in his head. He starts playing detective. He checks your Instagram stories, wonders about every little post, analyzes the tone of your last text. Is she busy? Is she talking to someone else? Is she testing me? Did I mess up? Every silence becomes a puzzle piece, and he can't stop trying to fit them together. Think about the last time you watched a TV show that ended on a cliffhanger. You couldn't stop thinking about what was coming next, right? That's exactly what your silence does. It traps him in suspense. And here's where neuroscience comes in. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter tied to curiosity and motivation, spikes when the brain is faced with missing information. That mystery becomes addictive. Your silence isn't just quiet, it's the hook that keeps his mind glued to you. But curiosity isn't the only thing rising inside him. It quickly mixes with something deeper, and far more unsettling. This is where things start to get intense. When you go silent, it's not just curiosity that kicks in, it's insecurity. He starts asking himself, did she lose interest? Did I screw up? Is there someone else in the picture? That uncertainty digs right into his confidence. But here's the twist: while insecurity hurts, it also fuels desire. The fear of losing you makes him want you even more. His brain flips into fix-it mode. I need to prove I still matter to her. I need to win her back. Suddenly, every little action becomes a chance to get your attention. Picture him lying in bed at night, staring at his phone. He types out a "good night" text, hesitates, deletes it, types it again. He debates with himself. If I send this, will she even answer? Will I look desperate? That inner tug of war shows just how tangled up he is. Doubt and desire fighting for control. And here's the kicker. When a man feels he might lose something valuable, he often invests more. He may start reaching out more often, paying closer attention, even planning thoughtful gestures he never bothered with before. Why? Because your silence flipped the switch in his brain that says, don't let her slip away. And that's exactly how ignoring him shifts his entire perception of you, raising your value in ways he never expected. Here's where psychology really comes into play. Scarcity creates value. It's the same reason a limited edition sneaker or a sold-out concert ticket suddenly feels priceless. When something isn't easily available, the brain labels it as more desirable. The same rule applies in relationships. If you're always quick to respond, always available, he feels like you're already his. But the moment you step back, when you're not so easy to reach, his perception shifts. You're no longer ordinary, you're rare. Think of it like this. When there's a dozen cupcakes in the box, nobody rushes. But when there's only one left, suddenly everyone wants it. Your silence creates that same effect. You're no longer the constant presence he takes for granted. You're the last cupcake, the diamond in the case, the one-of-a-kind treasure he can't afford to lose. That scarcity makes him raise the stakes. He starts to see you not as someone who's just there, but as someone who could slip through his fingers if he's not careful. And that shift in value is powerful. But not every man handles it the same way, because sometimes, instead of chasing harder, his pride steps in. And that's when things take a very different turn. Not every man reacts the same way to silence. For some, it sparks determination, they lean in, they try harder. But for others, it bruises their ego, and that's when pride takes the wheel. A man's pride can be like armor. Instead of admitting, "That got to me," he'll tell himself, "If she doesn't want to answer, forget it. I'm not chasing." On the surface, it looks like indifference, but underneath it's often frustration, even hurt. Pride is his way of shielding himself from feeling rejected. And this is where silence becomes a filter. It separates the ones who truly care from the ones who were just feeding their ego. A man who's genuinely interested won't give up so easily. He'll circle back. He'll look for ways to reconnect. He'll show consistency. But the one who vanishes at the first sign of resistance? He was never going to invest much in the first place. So while his pride may cause some men to back off, that's not necessarily a loss for you. In fact, it's clarity. Because the man who sticks around despite the sting of being ignored, that's the one showing you he's serious. And once pride enters the picture, the whole relationship starts to feel less like comfort, and more like a silent power play. Silence flips the script. Up until now, he felt like he was in control, confident that your attention was his whenever he wanted it. But the moment you go quiet, the balance shifts. Suddenly he's not the one being chased. He's the one doing the chasing. This change taps into something primal. Studies show that testosterone, the hormone tied to competition and drive, spikes when a man feels he has to fight for something. In other words, your silence isn't just emotional, it triggers a biological response. It reignites his instinct to pursue, to prove himself, to win back what feels uncertain. And here's the key: silence, when used wisely, isn't about playing games or being cruel. It's about repositioning yourself. It's your unspoken way of saying, "I'm not the one running after you. I'm the prize." That subtle shift turns the dynamic upside down. But like any power play, there's a fine line. Used with balance, it creates attraction and respect. Pushed too far, it can tip into frustration and distance. And that's where the next challenge comes in. Knowing when silence draws him closer, and when it pushes him away. Silence can be magnetic, but it can also be dangerous, and the difference comes down to balance. A little space creates mystery. Too much space creates distance. If he feels ignored for too long, what once pulled him in starts to push him away. Psychologists call this the point of saturation, when a stimulus that once attracted suddenly repels. At first, your silence makes him curious, even eager. But if it drags on, his thoughts shift from, "What's going on with her?" to, "She just doesn't care." And once he reaches that conclusion, his effort fades. Think of silence like seasoning. A pinch of salt brings flavor, but pour in too much and the dish is ruined. The same is true here. Silence works when it highlights your independence, when it reminds him you have your own life, your own priorities. But when it's used as punishment or payback, it stops being powerful and starts being destructive. The art is in the dosage. Enough to keep him engaged, not so much that he feels shut out. And if you've ever wondered what men really admit about this behind closed doors, that's where the next part gets revealing. When guys are hanging out with their friends, away from you, that's when the truth comes out. You'll hear things like, "Man, she went quiet and it drove me nuts," or, "When she doesn't reply, I can't stop thinking about her." They'll laugh it off, but what they're really admitting is that silence gets under their skin more than they like to admit. They won't say this directly to you. Pride won't let them. But in those behind-the-scenes conversations, they confess just how much it bothers them. Some even admit that it's the mystery that hooks them the most. Not knowing where they stand makes them more invested, not less. The part they never tell you is this. Silence taps into their deepest fear, that maybe they're not enough. That hidden insecurity is why your silence doesn't just fade into the background. It echoes. It lingers. It sticks with them in ways words never could. And that's the secret men keep to themselves. It's not the arguments, or even the harsh words, that hit the hardest. It's the quiet, because quiet leaves them alone with their doubts, and those doubts can be louder than anything you'd ever say. Now you see it. Ignoring a man is never just about silence. It's a trigger that can stir up curiosity, insecurity, desire. It can raise your value in his eyes, or expose his pride and make him pull away. The real power isn't in using silence as revenge, it's in using it as balance. It's your way of showing that your life doesn't revolve around him, that you have your own priorities, your own rhythm, your own worth. When you use silence wisely, it doesn't push him away, it makes him realize you're someone he has to earn. So I want to ask you, have you ever tried this? What happened when you did? Drop your story in the comments, because your experience might help another woman who's going through the same thing. And remember, sometimes the loudest message you can send isn't in what you say, it's in what you don't.